Daniel and I have been friends and worked together many times. I've known him. You know, what's really unusual about Daniel is that typically you've got a guy who's really strong on product and technology, all of that stuff. And then on the other side, you have a different guy who's good at strategy and sales and communication and marketing and general management. Here's the guy who defies the rule. You got one guy. You got one guy who has it all, and I kid you not, he really does. So just as soon as you want to say, wow, that's really incredible marketing, you look at the product creation and you look at the general management and the leadership and so forth. And so what I have to say, and there's been some amazing entrepreneurs that have been on stage here, but Daniel is one of the most well-rounded, all around, hits it out of the ballpark consistently and kind of defies odds. Kind of defies odds. So would you please welcome Daniel Doulton.
Thank you. Okay, after lunch slot, let's get the pace up. Let's get you back suborbital, but it's not going to be the vomit comet, right, Jane? No, both Jane and I share a very gentle approach to space. And by the way, Jane is, as you know from yesterday, a fellow suborbiter, a Brit. Yeah, there you go. So she's the canary in the room. If she falls off her perch, you know things aren't going right up here. So, all right. The story here, really simply, is this. It's an interesting piece of backstory. 3 things: location in space changes the game entirely. Number 1. Number 2, I have 3 kids, and climate anxiety is a real issue in our family. And I was very lucky to be able to direct the little bit that I can do in this world towards something that I think can help. And the last bit is, I have a background in AI, and when I came into this category, I am the imposteur royale because I have no aerospace background, but I have a lot of passion and understanding for how data can change people's beliefs, behaviors, and markets ultimately. So underneath this, as promised at the bottom there, Earthwatch AI, this is what this is about today. So if you missed the rest of it today, you're good. So for me, really, it was this very important capability to say, well, imagine if we could see our Earth live all the time in high definition. Wow. We'd be able to see things that we haven't been able to see to date. So many things we don't understand about how this planet actually works take place in small time sequences close together and over very big geographies, over big spaces. And that would put us in a place to start solving some of the biggest challenges we face. We've heard quite a few talks up to date about how we're trying to address our impact on this planet. This is our little add to it. Don't fall over, canary.
Sorry.
Let me go to, there we go, right. So how do we get suborbital? Well, let me tell you how this story starts. I'm going to play you a video of what a suborbital platform looks like. This is us in Spain. There she is, our suborbital solar glider.
Yeah.
That is it. We have liftoff.
Wow.
She's underway. And what happens here is she simply climbs up very gently all the way up to suborbital space, about 60,000 feet, 70,000 feet, where she's now technically in space, unregulated airspace, and from there she will fly off to her mission, anywhere on the globe. And while she's up there, which can be months at a time, and ultimately years, she'll gather data, do anything you want to, and then, like E.T., comes back home. And I hope you'll notice it's an incredibly low takeoff and landing speed. So we don't have any complex, difficult, expensive launch requirements. In fact, we can launch it with a balloon if you like. Send it up, drop it, off she goes. So really, really simple. Classic out of a garden shed British inventor type of solution, but brilliant because it allows ultimate flexibility in how we operate, where we serve, and the economics that come behind it. But I also fell into this because when I found out, having gone to the European Space Agency conferences, NASA, and spoken to other people in this, I didn't realize that the people who are on the front line, not just defending against disasters, but thinking deep about the science of planetary change, they're data poor. I couldn't believe, and one of the scientists told me, on average, they spend 6 to 9 months a year aggregating and stitching data together. Then they can run a model, but then they're uncertain because the data itself came from different sources and there might be some discrepancies, which, as we know, the engineers and scientists in this room, you only have to put a 1% problem in and it can quickly escalate against you. And then you get the deniers using it, and the rest, as we know, is an awful political mess. What's different about us? It's really simple. It's all about location. So in space, to stay in orbit, you got to fly around at a hell of a speed of just over 17,000 miles an hour. In suborbital space, we get to sit still. We get to watch for days, weeks, seasons, years. It can be over one place, over very large areas, but we get to control our position, which means, really importantly, we get to live stream. So we're the first platform to be able to live stream the Earth across all sorts of different sensor types and do it anywhere. Conversely, our friends up here, the billion-dollar kind of platform you want to put up there, can only take an image as it flies by, and nearly always is exactly the same time of day, same location. So we can sit there and generate hundreds of thousands more samples of an area than a single image can from any other layer above us or even below us. And that allows us to see the Earth in rich details in ways that wasn't before possible. And the fascinating thing about this, and this is the bit of the AI bit I promised you up front, is that that's when I realized, and I fell down the rabbit hole truly at this point, that with this data, when you have video-grade data, everything else is a subset. This is the storyboard on which satellite images can be collaged in. Sample data from the ground layers below or planes below also get given their context on the true storyboard of what was actually going on before, during, and after that particular sample. And what we call our unique spatial temporal resolutions, they enable AI to do stuff we haven't been able to do at a planetary scale. And that's how we get AI to look over and watch over very important areas of our planet for us and tell us what's important, tell us what the relationship is between a butterfly flapping its wings here and something happening several thousand kilometers away. And that can be years away between the two events. That's the magic of this. This is when you get an unprecedented capability to leverage technology to help us accelerate our capabilities on this planet. And we've started out really focusing on our planet stewards. First responders, people in the science communities, agencies, municipalities, and right next to them, not far behind, all those people who are looking after and building and managing big infrastructure utilities. We've heard about some of them here today. Right across the insurance, agriculture, mapping, and of course, ultimately, the next generation. And the three good things that we do, we start with the live capability, live situational awareness. You can see things as they happen and understand them now, not a week later, through to understanding how patterns of life work, whether that's us in urban areas, animals, migrations, all sorts of things. We can see those as well. And then, of course, we have the data for deep science, where you can analyze very big data sets, high resolution across all sorts of time series. All of those come from one capability. But to put it in sharp focus, the one that really gets me jumping around and excited by one of the things that we can do is this. We all know the problems of wildfires, but I probably guess most of you don't know that wildfires now, as measured, the ones that we are measuring, release twice Germany's CO2. Germany's annual CO2 emissions, twice that. Which means if wildfires were a country, they would be the fourth largest CO2 contributor on this planet.
Whoa.
Isn't that something?
Whoa.
So if we could just deal with that, we might have a chance of avoiding this terrible scenario of excess temperature rise. The good news is that the fire chiefs all around the planet agree on the same thing. They all say the number one priority for us is early detection. If we know about it soon enough, we can deal with it and we can mitigate most of these problems and stop them becoming out of control wildfires. They're just a forest fire or a small bushfire. That is the number one priority. And specifically, they've set what they thought was an impossible challenge. Can you detect fires about the size of a big barbecue in under 11 minutes over vast areas? Thinking that this was the impossible holy grail, the good news is we can. We can deliver this. So that's going to be an important part of my story. But who's behind this? Let me start with the guy who's not in the room, who's my co-founder, Andy Elson. Real legend in high altitude. If you look at his backstory, he has designed around-the-world balloons, Steve Fossett, etc. Anyone who's done around the world probably would have come across Andy Elson somewhere. And he's got all sorts of records. I won't bore you with the details, but I mean, just ridiculous what he's managed to achieve and how well regarded he is in that community. The most important thing for us here is that he's actually designed and operated the only 3 successful solar gliders today that are in operation. So we've got a real quality player there. Over here, the other chap, the most relevant bit is that I spent the previous 4 and a bit years building the business of another suborbital platform company and managed to secure off slides mostly, about 58 million in pre-orders from these big players, mostly these big agencies. Thank you. And of course, I have several ventures in AI behind that, hence I came to this somewhat prepared with what the task was ahead to be able to automate this. Okay, what's unique about us? Well, as I said, Andy actually has been in this game for some time. He actually designed the first generation of these solar gliders for Kinetic to be able to go and actually photograph a balloon that had a capsule on it that was at about 100,000 feet, and they're like, oh, yeah, we've got to film this. Hadn't thought of that. Andy went off into his shed and came up with a design that later became a product called Zephyr that was bought by Airbus, which is now being used for battlefield reconnaissance and surveillance, so probably flying over places like Ukraine right now. His team then span out a second version of that, slightly bigger, better thought out. That was bought by the next big player, British Aerospace Systems. It was a Me Too. They've got it doing exactly the same thing, battlefield reconnaissance and surveillance. And it wasn't until the third generation, and that's when I met Andy, he designed a commercial version with the UK's mapping agency, the Ordnance Survey. And the short story is they spent 4 years and quite a lot of money on developing the flight capability. And then there was, as ever, God bless the government, a change in politics. Blue went to red or something, new political master. They shut the program down because they realized we're not an R&D especially an aerospace R&D organization. No, we're a mapping data processor. So Andy and I stepped in and bought out the assets. And that's how Solaris was born. So we don't come out the blocks cold. We have some depth to our platform, hence the videos. What's unique about this is that as a commercial platform, this has been designed to do several key things. The first is gather high-resolution data. This was for mapping. They needed centimeter or even better resolution, which means you've got to have a very stable platform. That's why we've got a twin fuselage. That allows us to make the wings not only very aerodynamic efficient, but we get to spread the load, stiffen it up, better flight stability. Secondarily, simpler to make because with twin fuselage, all of our control surfaces are actually in the tails. There's none on the wings. So our wings are much easier to make, cheaper, modular, but more importantly, capacious. Lots of space in there for batteries, sensors, avionics, you name it. Pet lizard, you want to find out what happens? Probably can take it there. And lastly, which is critical, which is the modularity. Not only is it cheaper to build, assemble, and maintain, but when we land, if anything's gone wrong with it, it's a quick swap, and you're back operational within hours, if not a day. That's key to this. That's how you become commercial and scalable and a platform. And where do we sit? I pointed out this earlier before, but if you look at the layers above and below us, what's really important is that, and that's on this slide, is that being able to live stream completes the geospatial data stack. We've done stuff, we started off down here many years ago. World War I kind of taught us that flying things over the enemy was actually kind of useful. And that, first geospatial intelligence guys writing things down and sending pigeons back was really valuable. And that went on for about 100 years. And we just gapped. We went straight to space in the race to get to the moon and become, dominant space countries. And what happened was we forgot about this gap. And this is the sweet spot, because you can get the range, the resolution, and the coverage, but at the economics of an aircraft. I don't have a $1 billion problem. I have a few $100,000 problem. It's orders of magnitude better and more able to do it. And as I was mentioning, the key part of this is the type of data we source is unique. It's video grade, not images, or single snapshots from layers below us. And why is that valuable? Well, I'll give you a simple example. If we're flying over, say, the forest looking for fires, whilst we're there, we're going to be there for months. We're going to see a ton of other stuff whilst we're there. Our sensors capture stuff. And if you look at that inside just the agencies, it isn't just the fire agencies, it's forest agencies want to know, municipalities, even homeowners now, particularly California, the uninsured living in these urban wildland interface areas, they want to know, is there a fire coming? Where is it? Or what's happening? How much moisture is there? Or where's the fuel stock this year? All in there. And within that, you can cut several other products out of that too. So the beauty, again, of having this apex data, as we call it, is you get so many different ways to cut, slice, and create value out of it for different users of it. And of course, you'd expect me to show you a slide like this. I'm not expecting anybody to digest this after lunch. But just to say, we do ingest third-party data from satellites, as I said in the previous one. We add in our live stream data. We then use all sorts of good techniques, mostly AI, computer vision type techniques, to detect things and understand what's of interest. Out of the last 62 hours sitting over here, was there single thing of interest to this customer, yes or no? Where's the signal to noise in there, as we call it? And that's hugely valuable. And then we go through the product delivery stages, which allows us to create products, deliver, and learn. And the key bit, rather thin line here, all of this comes back into our learning layers, which allows us to adapt, which means our missions get smarter, the way we process data gets better, the products we serve customers are more effective. So I'm going to take you through where this fits. Almost everywhere is what this slide's telling us, but it groups into 4 themes. If you think of any of you got any understanding of the Earth observation market, satellites, it's enormous, but it groups around 4 big pillars. Obviously, Earth, all the sciences, climate mitigation, etc., is a huge opportunity in that. Food, very big. All of the questions about understanding conditions, movements, changes, particularly when you look at nations that don't have the luxury of big, row-farmed, consolidated places like in Europe and the States. You go to Latin America, Middle East, Asia. These are millions of smallholders. They have a cell phone. We can provide them all with the same high-res data, and more importantly, give them, as the governments in Oman and others wanted, direct instructions on what to do today and where. Not just, oh, it's looking good for next week, or maybe you want to think about going to market next week. No, we can tell you right down to the square meter. This is how we can help you get productivity up. This is what you should be doing today, etc. Stuff they never had. Resilience, it isn't just resources, it's around critical infrastructure. There's a whole slew of reasons for this. And ultimately, optimizing and protecting resources, whether that's, again, optimization of things like transport systems, power, or right through to protecting marine areas. So maritime is a very big vertical for us. Detection of dark vessels, dumping, right through to safety and movement of vessels across large bodies of water. So it just goes on and on and on. So it's a nice problem to have that I've got about, I don't know how many verticals there, but certainly 48 was the last count of very clear verticals we've qualified. We got to narrow it down. And so here we are focusing, as I promised at the outset, on the burning topic, no pun intended. Early detection is everything. There are, in fact, 3 stages to wildfire management. There's pre-season, which is mapping out basically the risks, the fuel stock levels. Then in season, I'll take California because that's where we're going to go. You've got about 6 months of fire season where it's all about immediate early detection and critically triaging. And then post-season, most people forget, well, one of the most difficult things is to restabilize the ecosystem so it doesn't become deteriorated and more susceptible to further damage and degradation. Quickly, California. Every year, on average now, just California's fires cost the US economy over $100 billion. It's utterly unbelievable the damage it does between direct and indirect. If you look at the quest that we were given, which was to detect fires in the first 10, 11 minutes, that would be probably a 98% reduction. But even though I take a 90% reduction, it's a very big change in this. But if I put that into hard numbers, and this is the really, really fun part, is that the other bottom line, it's not just purpose, but the profitable piece. We could cover all of California with about 52 of our gliders, giving them 24/7 persistent visibility over every single square kilometer at somewhere around the cost of a cup of coffee per square kilometer. There's nothing that comes close to that capability at all. And we have all sorts of other data. It's not just spotting the fires we can deliver in that. So it's a very powerful case. But more importantly, look what happens. So we can detect, that's layer number one. We can automate that process, which is a vast headache. You've been in any of these operations rooms scanning and seeing all this stuff. It's a nightmare. Machines do that brilliantly well if they have the data. But number two, I don't know if you know this, but when a fire or a natural disaster takes place, the incident controller takes control over all movement, not only of things on the ground, but near ground, drones and stuff, but all the way up, typically to sometimes 20 to 30,000 feet, depending where you are. They've got to become the air traffic controller now. These poor people are dealing with bits of information. They don't have big screens like in an ATC and headphones and people know what they're doing. They're trying to coordinate safe movement of stuff everywhere. Now, we can see through all of this stuff and show them where everything is on the ground with radar. We can show you in real time through smoke, cloud, rain, anything. Not any, where are your crews? Where are humans? Where are animals? Where are other vehicles or other objects you didn't know about? So many times they go into an area of fire and they discover, oh, we didn't know about this. Does anyone know what this thing is in this space? They have to qualify before they get close to it because it might be dangerous. It may not. So all of this stuff gets automated on a big screen for them. They see 3D view of everything. And ultimately, we get to feed, as I was showing in that model, we can feed live data into they've got these very sophisticated models for wind direction, fire propagation, etc. The problem is those models are completely useless because they get a snapshot of data that was 8 hours ago. How good is that when you're trying to predict real-time wind shifts off a fire that's changing literally every minute, and you're sending people in there to try and fight this thing? If that thing shifts 90 degrees, you could toast an aircraft out of the sky with that very easily. So we can transform the whole field operations from up there. Mapping our provenance real fast. Just taking the US again. 20% of the US isn't properly mapped in 3D. We could do that for about 3% of their current spend. Sorry, I should have mentioned, they spend about $140 million a year, by the way. So the US mapping agency spends an eye-watering amount of money flying little planes around with LiDAR on. Then they spend about 6 to 9 months stitching it all together because it's still not contiguous. It's messy. And it's not complete. Well, we can complete it persistently all year round and do the whole of the US for about 15% of what they currently spend. So it's a better product, higher resolution. They can do all sorts of things like vary where we go, and it's cheaper. And lastly, for the big impact part, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency in the US, they have a real problem. I didn't realize we had any game in this. I thought they got ground sensors, drones, etc. Surely you can detect and pinpoint the leak. The problem is they don't have enough time series data. When they go to court, most of their claims get thrown out by the judge because the defendant says, yes, Your Honor, but that leak was fixed. And oh, by the way, even though we leaked this amount, did you know that background levels are this level, so we're only 5 or 10%? It's not a penalty, Your Honor. Gets thrown out. They don't have enforceable data. And that's where all of a sudden the persistent capability to measure and to create benchmarks becomes invaluable to them. And lastly, on this topic, if you take all the different cases we have, what you'll see here is that we're typically down a couple of dollars per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent emitted. That's the cost for us to play in that loop and mitigate it. Today's market, and it recently was updated through the EPA and the IRA Act in the US, is priced it at $190 per ton now. That's now the correct benchmark value for a ton of carbon dioxide. So again, we're a fraction of that in helping mitigate. And lastly, for all the other cases, what's really interesting is that really this is a layer of national infrastructure. So if I take a case that we worked on quite detailed with Oman, the ability to put up a layer over Oman would cost them about 1% of what it does to put stuff in space. They have a space program, they think, which is basically buying into someone else's satellite program, and when that satellite comes over, they're lucky, but they've got to wait to go all around the world. For 1% of that number, they could put up our gliders and provide them with higher resolution data under their control, in their airspace, effectively. And there are so many things you can do from when you're up there. So I won't go through all of them, but the list is long and valuable, and that's the best part about this. Right, why are we viable? Well, not just because I showed you a video, but we've had some traction. The US Department of Interior has already signed a letter of intent with us. That's for mapping, plus natural disasters, etc. So that was a good start. The product itself, as you can probably tell, I won't bore you with all the details, but if you rank this against NASA's level of technology readiness, we're already in the green zone, which means you're very close to product. And we're about 18 months away from closing that gap and getting into a production-grade capability. Patents, very important to me. I have a career of creating patents, but in our case here, our initial filings last year, both in the US and the UK, put 23 new unique claims around the whole system, not just the airframe, but the combined system. And there's probably another 40 or 50 behind that. So it will be a rolling thicket of patents, as we call it. So that's good. And lastly, facilities. What you saw in the video was actually us flying out of Europe's largest MRO, which means commercial aircraft recycling servicing center. It is an important point because not only do we have an aerospace hub that we operate out of, we have great meteorological conditions, and we're in a military-controlled airspace, which means it's much easier for us to operate. It's a test area. And this is all come together because the government of Spain has thrown an enormous amount of incentives and grants to stimulate aerospace investment. In fact, they're building a 1.2 million euro facility for us right now, which will be right down there at the end of this runway, so we don't even have to drive. We just walk out, bring the gliders out, and off they go. So we've got the infrastructure, the facilities, got government grants, etc. And if you put it into our financials, which doesn't include any of these grants, the really important thing to take away from this is quite simple. Number one, we only need about 8 gliders to fly for us to go break even. One of those customer cases I showed you is way in excess of that. Forest fires is 50 just for one state in the US. Mapping would be about that number straight out the gates, but if I add two other jurisdictions in, we'd be about 15 or so. So it's not hard to get to our break-evens. And we only have to go another 12 gliders built, which we can do out of the small the facilities we have in Spain, for us to be generating 30 million and be very profitable as a company. So without pushing anything on scale, we can get to EBITDA positive inside very secured accounts, AAA-rated government contracts. So where are we now? What are we doing, and what are we asking? Well, the model says we're looking for about 15 million total to get to cash positive. But let me take you back a step in the key stages. So you've got to remember, what's happened is we've had the first stage, 10 million or so invested over 4 years. That bit has been done. That is the high-risk platform development stages. So that was done for us. We then stepped in, created Solaris, and it breaks into 3 simple stages. Stage 1, where we are now, is completing the development. So that's roughly 5 million that we're raising for now. Second stage gets us into demonstrator missions with customers. In fact, not a promise, but it looks like I've already got 3 customer demonstrator missions queued up for this year. So we're in fact in this bubble already before I got there. And then the third stage, 5, is really about building to customer orders. So this is really working capital facilities, and that's why Spain is so interesting to us, because the government will fall over itself to give us grants for equipment, training, people, etc., because it's about employment and about retention of talent and technology in region. So that's kind of a soft end of it, if you like. So our ask today, very simply, is that we're looking for funding to close out this first 5 million today. We have 1 million already raised in a safe note. Okay. So I hope in summary you can see we've got everything you need. We're quite unusual as a seed round startup, as in we're not really a startup, but we've got everything. We've got the team, that's for sure. We've definitely got a market lined up. We've had enough experience and already got engagements there. And the R&D is pretty much complete. The expensive, risky stuff is done. We're in the last 25%. So, and I will say this, because I'm that way minded, it's a very strategic opportunity to be able to create and mine this new layer of geospatial data. There's no one else I know out there who is nearly as close to us, perhaps if you change your balloons, maybe. But it's a very, very powerful space, and it's an enormous opportunity. It makes the sector above us in Earth observation look about equal in size and value to us. Okay, thank you.
Wow, thank you. Superb. I mean, it's what I've known about you since 2009, you're just always focused on the revenue, but then you're always focused on the product and so forth. How did you get to be so efficient at doing all of this? Because you never communicate your stress. What's the secret here? No, seriously. I know the all the stories, the things that you tackled, big problems. You've had big teams and so forth. You never communicate the stress.
I think it's probably because I naturally can keep context and hold context for the team.
Okay.
And I learned one thing actually quite early on. The most valuable lesson was that great leaders, they hold the vision, they manage the energy, and they coach the team. They don't manage the team. And if you've understood that, then you will always find a way of unlocking the energy in the team to solve what were, and if you've known some of our challenges, what were some of cliff moments where you thought, Jesus, there's no way we're going to make it past this. And amazingly, somehow we did. And that's the word. It was a we here. So that's because I believe in the collective we in this, not the I.
Very good. Excellent. There was a hand that shot up there, and somebody shot up a hand, I think. Yes, Paul. Yeah. Here we go.
One thing as a kind of retail consumer data that I see a lot of is oceanography.
Mm-hmm.
You doesn't focus very much on the problems with forest fires. Oceanography has got issues with, for example, plankton and water pollution, etc. Is that something that you're exploring?
No, very much so. So I didn't give you the other cases simply because we've got to, zippity-doo-dah through this. But yes is the answer. So maritime, in simple language, maritime awareness is a very big category. So I'm going to loosely take Coast Guards. Here in Europe, Frontex, they've got a major problem with the Mediterranean. And they've just now selected suborbital as the platform or the layer from which to deploy sensing. The reason is that we can detect all sorts of vessel movements, dumping, etc. So that's their blind hole. And if you look at any of them, I'll tell you straight, they're lying when they tell you, we've got about a 10% awareness of what's going on. They're lucky if they've got 1 or 2%. And if you scale that around the world, how many big island nations are there right now with a lot of threat to their territorial waters? It's enormous. Yeah.
Spain.
Yes. See.
You got a strategic relationship going on with a proper sovereign country. What's going on?
With a proper sovereign country. It's really, and I have to say, it's a lazy answer from me because Andy actually had established that. But the answer, what really lies here is Spain has always had a tradition of aerospace, and it became second in Europe. I remember in my early consulting days at ADL, that was one of the big projects, was to help the Spanish government and Indra figure out how could they get back into the game. And the answer was they never were at that stage. But with the new space sector, it's a big leapfrog moment. And so Spain is investing very heavily. It's one of its 9 pillars of economic development into new aerospace. And we fit the profile. And they are giving us the conditions, not just meteorological, but they're giving us the economic stroke tax environments conditions. And there's talent in Spain. There's actually quite a few aerospace universities, and the problem they've got is most of those people who graduate disappear up into France and other countries, and they don't stay in Spain. So that's what they're also solving for.
Now, you live in San Francisco. There have been wildfires up in Marysville, Rockville, that whole area where my mother lives. So please take care of her and make sure there's no wildfires and so forth on the route to Tahoe. But there's even some investors that I know that have invested because they, West and things like that.
Yeah.
So this is actually a much bigger issue. So wildfires happen close by.
Oh, yeah.
You're solving things that could endanger people's lives that they don't even realize this is like a big issue.
Yeah, and jumping ahead, one of my things I love the idea of is being able to just create an app and allow anybody to see in real time where is the wildfire and put up a geofence around their property, whatever's important to them. We'll be able to tell them. And that's about 10, 11 million people just in those 3 states.
This past summer at the Amanzoa, which is, one of the most luxurious resorts, the wildfires came up to the property. I mean, so you have these people with 50 million euro villas that were seeing flames lapping at the perimeter of the Amanzoa. It's crazy how unprepared the world is for wildfires. Yeah. It's just crazy.
It is a perfect storm, and it's unfortunately climate change is exacerbating the problem. We're getting more fuel stock and drier fuel stock.
Right.
And that's the problem.
Well, I love the if wildfires were a country. That was a good way to put it. Yes, please, Hugo, and then Bruce. Yeah.
How many airplanes do you need to observe Calafine?
Well, for wildfires, about 50 or so. That's it.
Just to see.
Yep.
dimension.
Yep.
Yeah.
About 50.
50 would give you persistent 100% coverage every single minute over every single square kilometer. Do they need that? I would argue possibly not, but it's in that it's up at that end of the scale. Whether it's 30 or 40 depends.
And you mentioned you can hold them always on the same place.
Yeah, they basically fly around in a flat circle over the GPS coordinate, which is, by the way, I'll mention that people say, oh, you don't sit still, don't you get, it's actually better to sample something from all sorts of angles, keeping around, and get 1,000 samples of it, because your resolution, if you like, and the data gets better. You remove all the false positives.
Excellent. Bruce? Yeah, we got Bruce.
A good friend that made up, he bought a house up in the vineyards, and the first thing he did was to trim the trees and trim off all the bush and the twigs and everything like that. So there is no fuel, even if it gets really hot. So can you detect that where the needy areas are?
Yeah, so measuring fuel stock levels is an essential part of understanding the risk map, if you like, of what's on the ground. And you're 100% correct. So one of the other areas, big areas of interest from the fire agencies, is to be able to tell people who have properties whether or not they're at risk and where. And it's a nightmare right now because they've got to go around one by one inspecting. They can't do that. It just doesn't scale. So we could automate that task and tell you in real time, because this can vary within a week as well. With weather patterns and stuff, you can suddenly go from no risk to high risk.
Yeah.
That's a key thing that unfortunately the government of California doesn't do a lot about.
The very
not.
cash-rich, well-run state of California. Exactly. Stefan, please.
First, I have to say it's really great possibilities. And what
Thank you.
about privacy? When you fly over residential areas and you have high definition.
Are you worried about sunbathing naked? So no, it's a good question. Sorry, the question was, what about privacy when we're flying over, say, populated areas? So the answer is kind of twofold. One is space has kind of already established that. Satellites are taking high-res images over areas, but non-identifiable to the person. We've also had from the ground, Google Street Maps famously has gone around and filmed all of us in all sorts of different compromising positions. But the law at the moment, and this isn't a hard answer, the law at the moment basically says if you're up above there flying over, there is no limit on what you can take as a sample. Our answer is that we fly for agencies, and it will be under their permission what resolution and where we sample. And so there are known areas where you just don't film. You just don't cover because it's sensitive, or they'll say you can cover all this area, but in this area you've got to drop the resolution to, say, 2 meters or something, so that it's non-identifiable. So yeah, we adhere to all of those things, but it depends a little bit on the context. But for thermal imaging, for fire, that's not a problem. I don't think you're hot enough to surface on our sensor. Don't mean to be unfair, but...
Diameter, because it seems to be quite big, so are you going to have different versions for different areas and that you can be more flexible and navigate easier?
Well, the answer to, if you mean flight diameter, or do you mean sensor diameter? Or both?
Both.
Right. So the easiest way of dealing with this, and this is the model, is we fly a fleet, okay? We don't just fly one. We'll fly a fleet. And it allows us to do quite a few things. It means we can vary the geometry, how spread out they are. We can vary where they have coverage. Some can be sitting still. Some can be mowing up and down or doing something else, what you want. In terms of how much area each one covers underneath it, that depends a bit on the sensor. But they normally measure in the thousands of square kilometers once we're up there. So that's the benefit of being where we are. We're about roughly 20 kilometers up, and satellites are around 400. So we've got a similar vantage point of being able to look back over very big areas and cover it. And then there are other techniques where if we actually fly a certain circle and tilt the sensor out, we can sweep a much bigger area. We can go sort of 8,000-10,000 square kilometers in a movement. So we've got all of that range. Sorry.
Jane?
Sensors, that was the word. So I assume you guys have started looking at sensors.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so many different things you're looking at. You must be using different spectra. Are they all on the same sensor, or are you going to have to switch out these sensors? Are they COTS? Are they your own sensors?
Yeah, so another magpie moment. So the other reason I fell into this is because I realized that go back 15 years ago, the big space agencies got out of launch and focused on things called applications, sensors, ground processing. So there's literally cupboards full of sensors that are designated for space that we can fly. We are plug and play compatible. I say that loosely because what happens is we take a sensor that's designed for 400 kilometers and we bring it down to 20, you're suddenly seeing ants and you're like, whoa. So, you know, descoping the zoom on it is probably all we need to do. But no, it's a good question. And in our world, we take everything off the shelf. We're not doing sensor development. Thank God, timing was everything. You know, had we done this 8 years ago, and when Andy started out, they had to do sensor development. Yeah, but now actually it's all been done for us thanks to the billions being spent on LEO. So yeah, riding their coattails.
Other questions for Daniel? Daniel, are you still having fun?
God, yeah.
Yeah, you love it, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
You're just like the entrepreneur's entrepreneur. Yeah, no, but you love it and so forth. And who's your number two? Is it Andy, or do you think of him as your business partner? Is there a guy in there that quote unquote works for you? How do you think of the team?
Well, so Andy is focused purely on the flight platform capabilities, and I'll be building out the rest of the team with me. So yeah. I don't know how that's going to evolve yet, but Andy's, you know, his sweet spot is when he's down digging things out from under the ground, as it were, and coming up with unbelievably creative ways of solving problems that everyone had said, no, can't do that. Oh, no, you'll never get through regulation on that. I mean, amazingly, if you just leave him alone, he will come up with answers that no one had thought of. So,
fabulous, fabulous. Listen, thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
Is, I think, let's see, you were in FT Mykonos 2022.
That's right, yeah.
And then we had you back on stage in winter last year, but remotely.
Yep.
And so this is your third, yeah. And so.
Do I get a prize?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much.